Hello, my name is Colin McMichael, and I'm the Education Coordinator here at Treefolks. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Austin's urban forest. Treefolks is Austin's only nonprofit dedicated to preserving the urban forest, and we run programming throughout the planting season to meet that goal. Planting season in Central Texas is October 1st to March 31st, so check out www.treefolks.org/events during those dates to find out how you can help too. Treefolks offers volunteer reforestation, volunteer tree planting, education, and other opportunities. Today we will be discussing what an urban forest actually is and how the trees in it work as a type of green infrastructure. From there, we will discuss a few of the common trees we see in Austin's urban forest and the benefits we get from each of them specifically. And lastly, we will conclude with a brief discussion of the benefits of tree diversity in our urban forest. So what is an urban forest? Well, if a forest is a collection of trees, an urban forest would be the collection of trees within the confines of an urban area. Essentially, it's the trees in a city. Urban forests are different than traditional forests. The trees are farther apart, they grow in human-altered environments, they are exposed to more pollutants, and they impact human daily life in a surprising number of ways. Humans and trees really have the same requirements. This might be something to do with the fact that humans evolved as a forest edge specialist ape, but it has resulted in human settlements throughout what is considered the forest belt of the United States. This is direct competition for space between trees and humans. So what would happen if we tried to encourage the trees and forests to return to our urban centers? What if instead of competing for space, we started living in a type of symbiosis with trees where we both benefit? Living trees in the ground provide a host of ecosystem services that make life around them easier. These services are often referred to as co-benefits of tree planting, and people have only begun to understand how much they affect every aspect of our lives. Unfortunately, these effects are not felt evenly across the population. Affluent Americans routinely get more than their fair share of the ecosystem services provided by these trees, since their neighborhoods tend to be more heavily canopied. Conversely, more underprivileged populations see fewer of the co-benefits that would actually help them, like fewer health problems, lower energy bills, and less stress, because they live in less treed areas. Addressing these concerns is referred to as environmental equity and is a major part of what Treefolks does. Especially in Austin, there is a strong dichotomy between East and West, both in socioeconomic metrics and tree canopy coverage. That means the wealthier population to the west has more canopy, and the less affluent population to the east has less. This results in an impressive need for programs to address environmental equity concerns in Austin, something that Treefolks is proud to say we do. Interestingly, Austin's urban forest is actually multiple different forests mashed together. The west side, that was mentioned previously, is the Edwards Plateau ecoregion of scraggly oak-dominated forest underlain with limestone. To the east, you find the Blackland Prairie ecoregion, which holds a patchwork of grasslands and riparian forests that have historically been utilized as farmlands. Some species overlap in both of these ecoregions, but there's a sharp divide in the types of forests seen in either place, making Austin's greenery especially unique. As I mentioned, trees make urban life easier. They do this through what we call ecosystem services, and that's what makes them green infrastructure. Ecosystem services can be pretty much anything a tree does, from sequestering carbon to things much less easy to quantify. And because these things make our lives easier in urban areas, that makes them infrastructure. The canopy of a tree slows rainfall and prevents runoff. The roots allow this slowed rainfall to better infiltrate the soil. The leaves and roots clean the air and water respectively. The leaves and branches obscure sightlines and noise. The products that trees make feed, shelter, and entertain us. Between windbreaks and shade, trees save homeowners millions of dollars annually. Also, the trunks of trees can slow cars, and that's not even an off-color joke. There is evidence that the vertical structures like tree trunks or telephone poles passing to the side of vehicles cause people to drive more slowly. But this isn't the end of the list when it comes to the benefits of trees, though. Trees actually provide so many benefits that the trees themselves can be considered a type of green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is any natural system used to improve city life, like rain gardens or planted roofs. Trees are one of the most versatile of the things that can be called green infrastructure. Trees physically alter the environment around us, but that results in real-world benefits. The temperature reductions mentioned on the last slide and the shade that they cast can reduce cooling costs for houses in town. Windbreaks can reduce heating costs. Green textures can increase the feeling of well-being in people, and on top of improving their health outcomes. Attracted wildlife also enriches our lives. And all of this makes us want to be outside more. Plus, don't forget the bounty of nuts and fruits produced by trees annually. Trees really do make our lives better in countless ways. I would like to apologize for my shaky voice for a second because there's a spider that has taken up residence on my microphone and decided to build a web between the microphone and my face. So, yeah. That's where we are in this talk. Moving on. So a lot of people are probably going to laugh that on the last slide I ended with trees make our lives better in countless ways, and then the next slide there's nothing less than a freaking cedar tree. As a sufferer of cedar fever, I feel your pain, but I have to admit these trees are amazing. First of all, cedars aren't cedars. A true cedar is in the genus Cedars, and they are related to pine trees. Texas's cedars are in the genus Juniperus, making them junipers, and they are more closely related to the giant sequoia than pine trees. The most commonly encountered juniper in Austin, and actually the most commonly encountered tree in Austin, period, is the ash juniper, Juniperus ashii. Austin is actually the easternmost extent of their range. Everything that gets called cedar east of here is its sister species, the eastern red cedar. Another juniper, but by the Latin name of Juniperus virginiana. Ash junipers are evergreen with small leaves that clasp the branches in adults. Juveniles and stressed trees display prickly blue-green, awl-shaped foliage. The trees come in males and females, with males turning golden in December due to pollen load. The cones produced by the females are blue and fleshy, resembling berries. They are enjoyed by birds such as the cedar waxwing. The bark is reddish-orange and dehiscent, coming off in strips. The branches start low and often come out in less than 90-degree angles to the trunk. Ash junipers have been erroneously labeled as invasive for decades, if not centuries. But they are in fact native trees essential to the proper function of Texas's ecosystems. Several native endangered songbirds require them for reproduction, such as the golden-cheek warbler. Despite this, junipers are maligned and removed from the landscape with abandon. Junipers were traditionally restricted to the northern slopes of hills by anthropogenic fires before Europeans arrived in Texas. After cattle were introduced, they became much more common. The non-native cattle preferentially consume hardwood saplings, leaving the prickly junipers to regenerate in their stead. Junipers often do need to be managed due to this and their nature as a pioneer species, but ultimately, humans need to find a new equilibrium with junipers instead of attempting elimination. Ash junipers are extremely drought tolerant when allowed to grow in groups, but single junipers can struggle in dry conditions. Their dense canopy does not allow for much undergrowth, which suppresses fires. The dense canopy also has incredible amounts of surface area that allow for greater pollution, runoff, and sound reductions than most other trees. The berries themselves are edible and have been used as a spice for millennia. The next most common tree after the ash juniper also causes a fair amount of allergies, the cedar or fall elm. Cedar elms have the Latin name Ulmus crassifolia, which means thick, coarse-leafed elm, which is a direct reference to their small cat-tongue textured leaves. These trees are incredibly common and incredibly productive when it comes to their wind-borne seeds, resulting in cedar elms just about everywhere there is fallow dirt. Cedar elms are easily identified by the coarse, light-colored bark and small leaves with slightly unequal bases. The branch architecture is distinct, with branches often curling under themselves, creating a canopy shaped like an upside-down basket. These trees get a brilliant gold fall color before losing their leaves. Cedar elms are especially drought tolerant, making them an excellent choice for a shade tree. Their especially narrow profile also allows for easy fitting into urban landscapes, and their tolerance of basic soil means they have no qualms about concrete. The tiny leaves and extreme ramification or twigginess of the branches increases surface area for better pollution, runoff, and sound reductions. The coarse bark can also store copious amounts of water. And the seeds of cedar elms are edible. The papery samara can be removed, and if you're a wildlife like squirrels, just eat it whole. And finally, the wood is strong and burns with an intense heat. The third most common tree, and often many people's favorite tree, is the live oak. Live oaks are great. They're evergreen, spreading shade trees, which is especially important since warm winters are becoming more commonplace. Plus, they produce acorns, which attracts wildlife from miles around. Interestingly, we actually have 2 species of live oaks and their hybrid that occur in the area. The most common live oaks are likely the hybrids of the plateau and southern live oaks. Southern live oaks are the traditional trees associated with the southeastern United States, often pictured dripping with Spanish moss. Their population extends up the Colorado River Valley to Austin from the Gulf Coast. The plateau live oak is a bit more upright and often covered in ball moss, but otherwise hard to tell apart except that it has much narrower, pointier acorns. Their population starts in Mexico, skips South Texas, and then has a major population center here in Central Texas, in the hill country with a bit of tapering off up into Oklahoma. The hybrid is intermediate between the two and can be found in and around Austin, and ball moss and Spanish moss also hybridize too, so you can actually find a hybrid tree with hybrid epiphytes, which is pretty neat if you're a population geneticist. Anyway, both species and the hybrid of them have similar enough characteristics that it's pretty hard to discuss their benefits by parsing them out. The wildlife attracted to these trees stand to be mentioned twice. The acorns are actually edible to people too, with proper processing. The shiny evergreen leaves do wonders at blocking sightlines and noise pollution. The coarse bark on the leaves capture runoff, and the spreading, dense canopy casts shades that cools even the hottest summer days. Thanks to the genetics of the plateau live oak, Austin's live oaks are surprisingly drought tolerant. Live oaks are especially long-lived, with specimens known over 400 years. So in an urban forest, people need to plant trees to ensure the trees remain. And when you're planting trees, we are doing so to ensure their ecosystem services remain in the environment, so why not focus on trying to mimic the forest with the best return on investment for ecosystem services? Old growth forests. Old growth is characterized by species diversity, lots of layers, dense vegetation, and uneven age classes. You can try to mimic this through things like using the 30-20-10 rule when planting, underplanting and doing selective harvests, and also accelerated successional plantings. The 30-20-10 rule simply states that when you are planting, no more than 30% of what you plant should come from one family, 20% from one genus, and 10% from one species. This ensures proper genetic diversity in the resulting planting project to bolster the resiliency of the resulting ecosystem. This can be very difficult to accomplish here in Central Texas because the vast majority of our trees are oaks. North America has an incredible diversity of oaks, and they are overrepresented in Texas's forests. Still, we should strive to follow this rule because oaks interact oddly when placed close to each other. Since our forests are oak-dominated, selective harvest and underplanting can increase diversity of layers in the forest. Smaller understory trees provide many ecosystem services, and layering canopy levels accelerates the effects of the ecosystem services provided. But back to oaks for a second. One of the reasons we are concerned that live oaks make up such a large portion of our urban forest is because there is a current disease spreading through many of our oaks called oak wilt. This is a fungal pathogen that is spread from tree to tree by a beetle seeking sap. Red oaks are the causal agent in the spread of oak wilt, in that a dying red oak will produce spores that the beetles feed on and then spread to white oaks or other red oaks. When the disease gets to a white oak like live oaks, instead of killing it in a matter of weeks like the red oak, it slowly succumbs to the infection. Often the progress is so slow that the disease is able to travel from the above ground tissue to the roots, where it begins to infect nearby trees through root grafts. All white oaks can graft roots together, but live oaks do it most commonly. Live oaks generally graft to other live oaks and red oaks, where white oaks generally only graft to their own species, or occasionally other white oaks. This creates a situation where when you have a forest of live oaks that sees one tree infected, the entire forest can die in a matter of years. Oak wilt can travel at least 100 to 150 feet annually through the roots, causing a spreading patch of death originating at the initially infected tree. Oak wilt is easily managed, though. With proper pruning practice, oak wilt transmission can be nearly eliminated. Oak should not be pruned between January and June unless you absolutely have to. Whenever you prune an oak, you need to paint your cuts with a simple can of spray paint. Avoid anything labeled wound sealant for trees because this is actually a bad product that can harm your tree. And with that, you now know the basics of Austin's urban forest. If you would like to learn more, you should continue your journey through our online UFS course, and don't forget to email education@treefolks.org if you have any questions. Thank you.